Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished professional and a respected author from South Carolina, USA, Mr. Keenan L. McBride. Keenan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. I appreciate you having me on today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Keenan is the founder of Virx-Leonatus or a VX culture. He's the founder of Success Strategy Training and Development LLC, and he's an author of a book which is titled Virx-Leonatus, The Art of Presence, Courtesy, and Cultured Command. So, Keenan, before we come to your book, a few questions for you. Looking back on nearly 30 years in industry, what were the defining moments that shaped your evolution from an operations leader into a coach, strategist, and a cultural thinker?
Well, I have to say that honestly, it was my being able to work on both sides of the equation. Working in operations, of course, you learn the ins and outs of what to do, how to do, why to do,
Mm,
and then when you switch over into leadership, which my first foray into that was just through continuous improvement and learning and
mhm,
development, of course. And you learn more about how people learn, what makes people learn.
mm,
And so that kind of started my inquisitiveness, if you will, um, into that foray, into
mhm,
that culture. And so
mm.
I've been in that culture now ever since, some over 20 some years, and I'm not looking back.
Fascinating. Your work reflects both discipline and empathy. Was there
Yes.
a specific challenge or failure early in your career that taught you the importance of balancing the two?
Actually, yes. I was working for a rather large company at one
Mm,
time, and the my boss actually left the company, and I was left in position there to run our training program.
mhm,
And so, in running the training program, I was doing so without the title
mhm,
of a manager at the time and without the salary of a
mm.
manager.
Yeah.
Yet for almost 2 years, I was basically running the training program with two gentlemen reporting to me and a document control specialist.
Mm.
And so I could have easily let that make me bitter.
Yeah.
I could have easily let that shape me into something that would not be productive.
Mm.
However, I use it as an opportunity to make myself better.
Mm.
I saw that I was going to be exposed to things that in another world I wouldn't have been. So I
Mhm.
learned how to do those things. I learned departmental budgets and balancing budgets and working with agencies of the state and working with partners and other third party entities, those type of
Mm.
things, and networking with other people. And so I kind of look at that as my tuition, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
I for what I missed in salary, I gained in experience.
Correct. What a
Mhm.
great response. Thank you. You also credit your father as a foundational influence. How did his example shape your understanding of presence, conduct, and leadership long before you had the language for it?
Basically, it's his presence. I was blessed enough to have a father that was always there. Um, he from day one and with discipline and discipline that I deserved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's with discipline and with his words and his lessons. And he always showed up to what he needed to show up to. And one thing about it is I had him all the way through my formative years, all the way into my adult years.
Mm.
And unfortunately, I just lost him in November
Oh,
um,
sorry.
last year. Thank you.
Mm.
But he was around long enough to see my own children grow to
Mm.
adulthood
Mm.
and be a consistent presence in their lives as well. And he was there every day. He worked every day. He showed me the right way. And so I just have that, and that
Absolutely.
stuck with me. Yes.
And I can understand that fully. My father was a very highly decorated brigadier general, and he was my
Nice.
closest friend. So
Very nice.
completely understand and empathize with what you've said. But Keenan, now let's move to your book. You're author for
Sure.
a book titled Virx-Leonatus, The Art of Presence, Courtesy, and Cultured Command. And before I ask you a question, I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out Mr. Keenan and McBride's book. So my first question for you, Keenan, is you introduce Virx-Leonatus not as a brand, but as a philosophy. Why
Yes.
was it important to frame this work as a way of living rather than a leadership method?
Well, there are so many methods
Hmm,
on the market.
hmm,
We could all name an acronym or some other method that we were familiar with.
hmm,
However, leadership, in my opinion, from what in my research, I found leadership boils down to one thing, and that is people.
hmm,
And so, reaching people, one thing we try to do is get people to do things that we want them to do.
hmm,
And to me, leadership is about connecting with a person to make them want to
hmm,
do something. And so, Virx-Leonatus, as a philosophy, it's about connecting with a person, but not in a way to where I'm giving up authority, but I
hmm,
am turning that authority into more of a quiet strength to
hmm,
where it exudes from me versus you hearing it from me.
hmm,
And I based that on five distinct pillars
hmm,
of Virx-Leonatus culture, with the first being refinement of mind. We have to
hmm,
change the way that we think and the way that we see people.
hmm,
And the second being elegance in expression and dealing with people with respect, dealing with people in a way that draws them to us versus
hmm,
repels them. The third one being courtesy and charisma. People love people that they want to be around,
yeah.
right? That attracts people, and so being courteous, being charismatic, having a drawing effect on people,
Hmm,
being able to show people that, hey, I actually am concerned about you.
hmm.
Those things attract people.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And the last two were confidence and command.
Right.
But you still have to have a measure of that, but not in a way that repels. And then cultural appreciation.
Correct. Correct. Well said. The lion is central to your book, and I see a lion just behind you over your left shoulder also.
Yes.
What qualities of the lion best capture the kind of leadership modern organizations are missing today?
One thing is, if you can picture a savanna, a watering hole, and you've
Hmm.
got other animals that are around,
Yeah.
and the lion is there. The lion makes its appearance.
Hmm.
Other animals may not see it,
Hmm.
but they know it's there.
Hmm.
So, in that same vein, the world just knows you're there. You walk into a room, you walk into you're at your place of employment or wherever,
Hmm.
and people know you're there. They don't have to hear you.
Hmm.
And this is not from the standpoint of fear, but it's a standpoint of security.
Hmm.
And verse, you lead by dominion instead of leading by domination.
Hmm.
And dominion basically meaning I care for this assignment. This is my team.
Yeah.
They can come to me. I will take care of them.
Hmm.
And when people feel that you will take care of them, they will follow what it is you need for them to follow. They will let you
Absolutely.
lead.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of your strongest ideas is that true power lies in restraint. How does restraint actually increase authority rather than weaken it? Give me an
If you can,
example.
yes, if you can picture a crane holding a 1,000 pound weight,
Hmm.
okay, are you going to walk underneath that weight?
Hmm.
Even though the crane
No.
has got it,
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
Hmm.
Because the potential is there for it to fall.
Correct.
And so I speak about something in the book called potential.
Hmm.
And that potential is through our actions, through our words, our team knows that we have the potential to act.
Hmm.
We have the potential to hold people accountable,
Hmm.
and we don't mind doing so. However, that potential just means I don't always have to use that.
Hmm.
My presence alone and my concern alone,
Hmm.
in effect, kind of works as an accountability factor
Hmm.
in helping people because you have to have it's three components that you have to have with people.
Hmm.
And that is you have their hands because they're working for you.
Hmm.
You also need to have their heads
Hmm.
because you want them to think, but you need their hearts
Yeah.
to make people want to. And so when people feel security and they feel good leadership and
Hmm.
concern and empathy, they see they do whatever you need them to
Hmm.
do. People will
Hmm.
follow you and you can have a good relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well said. You also write that a leader's image sets the table before their knowledge is served. What are
Mhm.
some of the common mistakes leaders often make in setting the table?
Well, one of the most often I see, I call it a leadership triad
Hmm.
that I promote is you have to know the part, act the part, and look the part.
Hmm.
And if you miss any one of those three factors, you'll flame out
Hmm.
after a while.
Hmm.
And so a leader has to set the table in the fact that they know the part, they know what it is that they
Hmm.
are trying to accomplish, they have the mission, they have the vision. You act the part by not deviating from that,
Hmm.
listening to your team, but
Hmm.
at the same time being in there to guide them as necessary
Hmm.
and be a sounding board. And then you look the part.
Hmm.
If I'm looking for a police officer, I'm gonna look for someone with a police officer's uniform.
Right.
I'm gonna look if I'm looking for a doctor, I'm looking for someone in a doctor's
Correct.
coat or whatever. So if I'm looking for a leader, I'm looking for someone that looks and carries themselves as a leader, not arrogant but confident.
Hmm. Very well said. Let's talk of courtesy. So courtesy is often dismissed as as outdated or soft in today's environment.
Mhm.
Why do you believe courtesy is, in fact, a strategic advantage?
Yes, courtesy is actually the language of the refined, and
Hmm.
I say that because what that shows is your ability to be courteous, even in high pressure situations,
Hmm.
shows that quiet strength. It
Hmm.
shows that restraint because people will say things
Hmm.
and do things in order to make you break your
Hmm.
courtesy.
Hmm.
Once you do that, you cede power to them
Hmm.
and you allow them to become your judge, your jury, or executioner. And
Right.
so by keeping your restraint and by being courteous and showing that you can do so even
Hmm.
under pressure, then you actually say to others that you possess a massive amount of power and
Hmm.
restraint because they wonder how you're able to do so.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and in the long run, that builds relationships.
Absolutely. That you put it very, very well. I would never have understood how courtesy could be a strategic advantage, but you clarified
Mhm.
that. Thank you. You also emphasize silence as a leadership tool.
Mhm.
How can leaders learn to be comfortable with silence without appearing disengaged?
One of the sayings I do have in the book is you learn to become the room's point of stillness.
Hmm.
And if you can imagine a boiling pot, well, you can't see clearly what's on, in that water. It's boiling. You can't see clear. But when you turn the heat down, the water stops. Well, and you can see clearly. So, being the leader, you have to listen to all of the ideas, listen to
Mm,
all of the conversation,
mm,
but then be the point of stillness for the room to clarify everything,
mm,
bring everything together. And where a lot of leaders may make a mistake at
mm,
is wanting to be the first voice
mm,
heard, the strongest voice heard.
mm,
But what you do then is you create groupthink
mm.
because your team then will just follow what you say.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's a great idea. I think we
Mm,
should go in that direction. So if you really want to hear what your team thinks,
mm,
be the point of stillness. Don't mind the
mm.
silence and
Very
clarify.
interesting. Yeah, very interesting. You also, let's talk of empathy. Empathy is positioned as an ethical cornerstone rather than an emotional impulse. My question
Mhm.
is, how should leaders practice empathy without compromising standards?
Well, to do that, one has to look at people almost in the same way that we learn to appreciate art, because I'm a lover of the arts.
Hmm.
I love art. And um, when you look at people that way, when we look at art, instead of saying, "Oh, that's a pretty picture. That's a nice picture."
Mm,
We a lot of times we say, "How does that portrait make you feel?"
mm,
Uh, for example, one of my favorite artists is Claude Monet.
hmm.
As a matter of fact, I have a print of his behind me.
Yeah, right
But
behind you. Mm,
and when I look at a Monet piece, it gives me
mm,
inner peace.
mm.
I feel peace, I feel calm.
Yeah.
And so if we look at empathy, empathizing with people where they are, that actually helps us deal with difficult people or
Mm,
people that we may deem as difficult. Maybe we couldn't get a good relationship with this person before,
mm,
but looking at them, looking at their situation, how dealing with that person makes me feel, how are they feeling?
mm,
It broadens our perspectives.
mm.
Whereas at one time, this person may not have been in my foreview,
Yeah.
but now, since I've taken the time to broaden my perspective,
Mm,
I can now see this person for
mm,
where they are and
mm.
relate to them.
Well said.
Once you relate to them, that's when you get that heart and you
Mm,
develop the want to.
amazing. Moving on, you write that confidence is certainty without comparison. And I love these little quotes from your book that I was able to pick up when I was going through it. Therefore, my question is, how can leaders cultivate this kind of confidence in a competitive environment?
I can say three words: know your craft.
Hmm. Yeah.
um, know your craft, but also always, always, always be willing to learn.
Hmm.
When people see that their leaders are willing to learn
Hmm.
and don't just, they're not too arrogant to say, oh, well, I don't need to learn, or either I know everything,
Hmm.
that's not going to get us anywhere. We have to be
Hmm.
willing to learn and improve and grow. And
Hmm.
really, that shows confidence on the leader's standpoint
Yeah.
because I'm showing you as my team member, I need to learn also. I'm
Hmm.
learning with you. So if a leader is confident enough to express that type of vulnerability,
Hmm.
the team feeds off of that and they
Right.
all learn together and they grow together.
Very interesting. Great response. Your book places strong emphasis on grooming, posture, and conduct, and I can see you live that as well. Why do these details still matter in an era of remote work and informality?
Famous football player actually said it better. If you look good, you play good.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, to steal that quote. So that also works to garner respect.
Hmm.
You have to you have to build self-respect
Hmm.
first before you
Hmm.
can expect any respect from others.
Yeah.
One thing that I am big on is carrying yourself how you expect others to treat you.
Yeah.
You see, I can't set a messy table
Mm.
and then expect five-star dining.
Yeah.
You see? And so I'm not saying you have to wear a suit and a tie every day. No, heavens no, I am definitely not in a suit and tie all day,
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
But whatever you're in, if it's a uniform, it's whatever it is, it can be neat, well
Correct.
arranged, and clean.
Presentable.
Yes.
Well said. Well said. Keenan, I have time for two more questions.
Sure.
If an organization adopted the VX culture collectively, what changes would employees feel first at a cultural level?
One of the biggest problems that companies or organizations have is
Mm,
communication
mm,
issues. If you go into a company and they say, "What are the biggest problems you have?" Well, it's communication, or either they say they tie it to leadership a lot of times,
mm,
communication and leadership. So with VX culture, VX is not a quick fix. It's not a fancy new acronym or method, but it works on the person. So it's not, it's about building us into better people
mhm,
based off of fundamental characteristics that we're generally taught as children,
mm,
but is expanded as adults, and how to apply it organizationally. And so that filters throughout an organization. You
mm,
want to communicate, so you look for more ways to do
mm,
so. You
mm,
want to lead, so you look for better ways to do so. You want your people to want to follow you, so
mm,
you look for ways to connect with them.
mm.
It's all in developing a want to,
Very
because
interesting.
you grow as a person.
Mm. Fascinating. And my last question for you. If my viewers and listeners could internalize just one idea from your book, and you've given so many, what should become their non negotiable leadership standard?
Oh, you're right. There is a lot in there I could draw on,
Mm,
but I think I would have to use, hmm, it's about presence, and it's
mm,
actually dealing with pillar number 4, dealing with
mm,
confidence and command. And it's that presence is the silent introduction of
mm,
words, a silent introduction rather, before words are spoken. And
mm,
so how we show up, how we present ourselves, how we speak to others, or rather, even before we speak to others, just how we show up and our movements, our actions, those speak the loudest before we even say a word.
mm.
And so develop your presence.
Fascinating. And on that note, Keenan, I just want to say what a fascinating conversation this has been for me. We every point that you gave me was almost like an interesting 101 for culture, leadership, and presence in the corporate world. I just loved your 5 pillars and how beautifully you've explained them in so many different aspects that I spoke about with you today. Thank you for
Thank,
all the stories. Thank you for all that you have shared with us. All the very best for your book. And thank you again. Good luck.
thank you so much, Ashutosh. I really appreciate you having me on your wonderful show.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.